And then I will see you back here at like 6:25.
I'm kind of worried we're gonna get a double order.
We'll see. Oh well.
Oh, oh well. Well, that's
Yeah.
not the worst thing.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So you're signing off kind of?
I will mute myself, but I'm
Cool.
here.
Okay. I'll mute myself
And
too.
okay, and then I will
And then
reconvene at 6:25.
yes, and I
Okay,
have my laptop here already set up and then I've got Teams open, so we're good to go.
perfect.
And Lee's gonna help me if the food order gets here late so that I can stay here as deputy and then she'll put the food in the kitchen and stuff.
Cool. Sounds good.
Cool, cool. Okay. Well,
Great.
I will press mute.
All right. Thank
Okay.
you.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Bye.
But you're, you guys do what you need to do, you just give me hands. Yeah, okay. All right, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the Oklahoma State Authority Board of Directors meeting to order at 6:29 p.m. And I'll go ahead and call a roll. Whoever is, Carolyn, will you be calling roll or Ivy?
Hi, Caroline here. Would you mind speaking into your mic so that I could hear just a little bit better?
I will eat the mic. Is that better?
Yes, okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Director Kennett,
Yes.
Director Flaher. Not present. Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annable,
Yes.
Director Alexander,
Yes.
Director Potter. Not present. Director Gill.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, so this portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the board on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Is there anybody here that wishes to speak on an item not on the agenda?
There is no one on Zoom.
Okay. Don't see anybody in the room. Okay. All right, thank you. We'll move on to new business. So the first item of new business is to authorize the general manager, assistant general manager, and deputy conservation manager to negotiate with Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency for assessors parcels number 72952-028 and 72954-005.
There is no presentation associated with this item. It's as shown on the agenda.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
I'll move to approve.
Let's see, let's make sure, do we have any public comment on this item?
There's none via Zoom.
So strange to hear Carolyn coming from the atmosphere. Okay. All right, so we have a motion to approve. And we have a second. All right, everybody. Yeah.
Okay.
Motion to approve by Director Kennett with a second by Director Gill.
Director Kennett,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annable,
Yes.
Director Alexander,
Yes.
Director Gill.
Yes.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. All right. Okay. Now we will make an announcement regarding the items we discussed in closed session, which were made prior to the closed session.
Good evening, Madam Chair. There are 3 items on closed session, all conference with real property negotiator, details of which are on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. All right, we will convene a closed session. Good here. Yep, yeah. Okay, we are back from closed session. Do we have a report?
No reportable action, Madam Chair.
All right, we are on to approval of the minutes from September 26, 2024. There a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Yeah.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve the September 26th meeting minutes, moved by Director Annabelle with a second by Director Kennett. Now the.
Oh, Pardon me. Director Kennett,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annabelle,
Yes.
Director Alexander,
Yes.
Director Potter,
Yes.
Director Gill.
Yes.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. Okay. All right. We are on to the approval of the consent calendar. Is there any member of the board that wish to pull any items from the consent calendar?
I'd like to pull C1.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, let's have a motion to approve every item but C1, and then we'll come back to that item.
Move. Go ahead. So moved. Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve items 1 and 3 excluding number 2. That's.
No.
Yeah, yes, no, I'm waiting for the parents, I guess.
I'm sorry, is it number 2 or number 1?
Number 1.
Number
Okay.
1,
Got it, thank you.
okay. Yes, I'm reading, that's my. Okay, so I have a motion to approve items 1 and 3 excluding number 2, okay. Moved by, yeah,
No.
yes. All right, moved by Director Potter, second by Director Kennett.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I want to be clear, Director Annabelle, you wanted to pull item 1, correct?
C1.
okay, all right, let me repeat the motion. We're gonna approve the consent calendar excluding item 1, and we're approving items 2 and 3. Good. Thank you. All right. Moved by Director Potter and seconded by Director Kennett.
Director Kennett,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annabelle,
Yes.
Director Alexander,
Yes.
Director Potter,
Yes.
Director Gill.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, so now we're gonna take item C1, which is the authorization of the purchase of a 2025 Ford F-150 Crew Cab Lightning Pro in the amount of $63,573.13. And Derek, did you want to address any questions?
Good evening, directors. This item is for the purchase of an electric vehicle as stated by the chair. That we use the Department of Governmental Services, DGS, through Sacramento to purchase this vehicle. This is the state's program that seeks out the lowest possible bid for these vehicles and gives us a deal that where we do not need to necessarily search for an additional bid item on it. Theoretically, the DGS would have the lowest price available for these vehicles. In addition, I understand the sales tax on that would be through Santa Clara County. We do pay Santa Clara County tax on it because that's where the vehicle will be registered. It does not go by where the vehicle is purchased. It goes by its registered address for the taxes. I understand that was a potential question about where the taxes would go on that vehicle. The vehicle would be built for us. The time frame for that would be 4 months before we would get the vehicle. So this is a built vehicle. It's not one that is on the lot. They have a standard model that's on the lot that we selected certain items that we want, like an extended range battery, the tow package for it, and a couple of other really minor things that brought the total price up to what was on the consent item. So anything that we would go out for would be looking for a dealer to basically build the same vehicle for us as well. I'd entertain any questions.
Director Annabelle, I believe you pulled
So,
this.
in terms of going out to local dealers, do we have any experience where we've asked them to build out equipment in the past?
Yes, we have, and the answer has almost always been like, well, we have these vehicles available for you, and it's really difficult to get a built vehicle. And we have never had success of getting a vehicle to our specifications from a dealer at this point.
Thank you. I appreciate your clarification regarding the sales tax.
Are there any other questions? Comments? You want to make a motion, Director Animal?
I'll make a motion that we approve.
I do second.
We have a motion to authorize the purchase of the 2025 Ford F-150 Crew Cab Lightning Pro.
Madam Chair, we want to make sure there are no members of the public on one.
Oh, yes, correct. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? No, okay.
Sorry, there are none.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion to approve from Director Animal with a second by Director Gill.
Director Kenneth,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annabelle,
Yes.
Director Alexander,
Yes.
Director Potter,
Yes.
Director Gill.
Yes.
Great, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Director Animal, for bringing that to our attention. We are on. New business, okay, so now we are on new business, which is providing feedback to staff on the Open Space Authority participation in the Santa Clara County Agricultural Mitigation Program and consider directing staff to develop a mitigation policy. And Aaron is going to lead us with the presentation.
Great. Good evening, Board of Directors. This is Aaron Hebert, Natural Resources Manager here at the Open Space Authority. And I want to present a little bit about a proposed program that is not yet circulated for public comment. So what I'm going to share is sort of light on detail, and we'll talk about that, and instigate a policy discussion about whether we want to participate in this program and whether the Open Space Authority needs its own policies in order to move forward. So in general, I'm here to seek your interest and input in whether the Open Space Authority would want to participate in the county's agricultural mitigation program, and I'll sort of spell out what that participation might look like. I also recommend that you direct staff to return to the board once the agricultural mitigation policy is actually out for public comment and there's sort of more meat on the bones, but for just sort of logistical reasons, it made sense to come tonight. And then finally, at your discretion, to direct staff to develop an agricultural and environmental mitigation policy for the board's consideration at a future date. So queuing up some future policy work should the board be interested in it. So just in a general sense, Santa Clara County is proposing an agricultural mitigation policy. And really what this would do is anytime someone is developing on agricultural lands, farmlands of a certain type, they would have to offset that permanent impact to agricultural lands by protecting existing agricultural lands through an easement. And I'll have a little diagram to sort of indicate what that might look like. Other counties in California have similar ag mitigation policies. The details vary, of course, but the idea being that if you're developing ag land, you need to protect existing ag land. This policy kind of applies or would apply to two different types of development. One is single family homes. And others are sort of like other larger discretionary developments, say like a multifamily housing or big box retailer. You can think of development of your choice. And it would only apply to parcels of a certain size. So for example, this policy would create mitigation requirements for developments on properties that are 5 acres or more. Properties that were, say, 5 acres or less would not have to mitigate for development. So in other words, if you were the owner of a 4-acre parcel and you submitted an application to develop a single family home, potentially under this policy, you would not have to mitigate for an impact to those agricultural values. I should say the numbers I'm throwing out are kind of hypothetical, again, because it's not circulated for public comment, but you kind of get the idea that above a threshold, you have to mitigate, and below you would not under the policy. So the mitigation itself would be the establishment of an agricultural conservation easement that would be held by a local land trust or a public agency. And that's really where our role could come in, should the board express interest in participation in the policy, is that under the proposed program, the Open Space Authority could hold these agricultural easements that were created by these developments and through this mitigation program. The other alternative that is going to be likely explored through the mitigation policy is essentially a developer would pay into a county agricultural mitigation fund. So let's just say hypothetically an acre of agriculture costs $20,000 in a certain area, and they're required to mitigate for 10 acres of agricultural impact. Well, that times 10, they would pay a fee into that. And then the county could use this money to then go buy and protect agricultural land through conservation easements, right? So it could be done a number of different ways in order to sort of get to that end goal of actually mitigating for the impact through a conservation easement. And then the sort of mechanisms of this would be through an EIR, and this environmental impact report in our area would have the effect, particularly in Coyote Valley, of streamlining single-family home development. And the reason I say that is because right now, current policy is such for ag and open space with the Coyote Valley overlay that the county must undertake a discretionary approval, which requires a higher level of CEQA analysis. So a single-family home under current sort of regulation has to go through an EIR process, which is kind of a big burden. Whereas typically in general settings like elsewhere in urbanized area, a single family home is categorically or statutorily exempt from CEQA and kind of just goes through a ministerial or administrative permit. So, depending on your view, that's either a good thing or a bad thing, that single family home development would be sort of facilitated through this sort of big programmatic environmental impact report. And I'm happy to talk about that more. So hypothetically, and forgive my art skills and my mapping skills here, but current zoning, as I understand it, provides for no more than 2 acres of development through a single family residence. In this case, I've shown 2 acres of development on a 5-acre farm parcel. And there are different ways that this program could allow for mitigation, and there are different ways it could calculate how much mitigation is required from the development of those 2 acres. So one option for landowners for parcels of a certain size would be to protect the remaining undeveloped acreage on their parcel through an on-site conservation easement, through an affirmative agricultural easement, which is a provision that the easement holder, say the Open Space Authority or a land trust, would have the ability to enforce, that is to say, require an agricultural operation take place under it. So that's one way this program could go down, through, again, on-site agricultural easements, or the developer could get all of their acreage mitigation requirements met through an off-site conservation easement, right? So in other words, they could work through the county or work through us or work on their own to find someone who wants to sell a conservation easement on their agricultural lands and protect that permanently. So that's kind of one way this could look. Another way this could look was through a non-single family development. So say they're converting 5 acres of a 5-acre property, and there's no on-site acreage left to preserve or protect through agricultural conservation easements. They would have to either, again, pay into this hypothetical fund that we talked about, or to, again, procure their own off-site conservation easement. So the mechanisms are a little bit complicated, but in general, the idea of the program is that should someone want to develop on agricultural lands, on lands with certain types of prime soils, that they would have to offset that somehow. And obviously people they want these programs to be relatively efficient. So whether that means paying more into this bank or working with entities like ourselves that protect agricultural lands, I think is to be determined. And there's a lot of kind of devils in the details there. Just at a high level, I would say the benefits of an agricultural mitigation policy, that the county has, is that it would create permanently protected ag lands, right? Something that is part of our mission, is something that's important. Because they would have to mitigate for the impacts to agricultural lands, there are costs associated with that mitigation. So in some ways, it actually raises the sort of barrier. It creates a barrier to entry for single family home development, because all of a sudden, under this proposed policy, you'd have to pay X dollars or procure your own landowner an easement in order to make your development happen. The downsides are, however, like I touched on, that this programmatic EIR would streamline single family home development, right? It would actually effectuate certain types of development. That's kind of the nature of the program. And I think another downside of the program, I think particularly to us in the context of what our role in this policy or program could be, is that you can imagine monitoring a 4-acre easement or a 10-acre easement on someone's property where the prior landowner was the one who did the transaction. They don't really have interest in farming anymore. And then all of a sudden, OSA is on your property being like, hey, why aren't you farming, right? There's an ongoing cost of monitoring and enforcement, right? And how or whether that is funded through this mitigation program is something that we're very interested in. Because even though obviously the goal of permanent protection of agricultural lands is an important one, we do a lot of similar work through agricultural conservation easements. We go in eyes wide open with those transactions on the costs of monitoring and enforcement. And as the board well knows, there have been some good properties and some not so good properties with agricultural conservation easements. And then, of course, another downside is that this, program would potentially streamline projects that we just straight up don't like, right? That are incompatible with our mission. So you can imagine OSA is interested in, protecting green spaces around the urban growth boundary, right? Well, if one of those green spaces is all of a sudden converted into, a large industrial facility, right, through this agricultural mitigation program, well, the mitigation program helped sort of make that happen. Now, I will say the other side of it is currently folks don't have to mitigate for impacts to agricultural land. So there's no offsetting action, right? So some good and some bad, and I'm happy to talk more about that, and certainly happy to return to the board once there's more details of the proposed program, but hopefully you understand the sort of general concepts. I want to talk a little bit about environmental mitigation too. The Open Space Authority is frequently navigating potential funding sources that really come from mitigation. And what I mean by that is a private party is doing something, generally some form of development or something like that, and they are required to mitigate. And then they approach OSA. They're interested in doing restoration on our land. They're interested in funding something that we may have in the works. Many different contexts, we are approached with different types of environmental mitigations. Generally, almost all mitigation arises from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, the Endangered Species Act, or the Clean Water Act, right? Those are really the sources where those regulating forces are requiring people to do some sort of mitigation, right? But, the specifics really matter quite a bit as to whether the Open Space Authority entertains those. Again, you can imagine a developer who's doing something that we're very much opposed to, that might not make sense for the Open Space Authority to entertain. I'll give an example from my old job that Mid-Penn was in frequent conflict with our neighbors at Lehigh Quarry. We had very different missions, as you can imagine. And I remember one day I got a email from the water board saying, "Hey, are you interested in doing stream restoration on, Permanente Creek?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but who's the developer?" And they said, "Oh, well, Lehigh Quarry." And of course, I was never going to go to my board and say, "Hey, let's help our neighbors out with this project," right? Because we're like sworn enemies, right? Years of battling with each other. So, the specifics matter quite a bit. Conversely, many such restoration projects have been funded on Open Space Authority lands. I think Caltrans has a mitigation project at Diablo Foothills that's created some wonderful ponds. There's another small mitigation project at Coyote Valley Open Space Preserve. There's a similar project along Fisher Creek that was from a Monterey mushroom discharge. So the Open Space Authority has benefited from, receiving mitigation funding and has really entertained those on an ad hoc basis, sort of just based on the merits of kind of what they are. So the reason staff brings this up is that if the board is interested in developing an agricultural mitigation policy, it shares a lot in substance and context with environmental mitigation. So, certainly the board has the discretion to continue on an ad hoc basis, and I think that's okay. But if you're interested in pursuing more formal policies, board policies to think about mitigation, that would make a lot of sense too. And I guess I would also just note that the Valley Habitat Agency, one of our biggest partners, and the Habitat Conservation Plan is in part a mitigation program. So when we talk about easements, when we talk about shared funding with them, some portion of their funding comes from mitigation. It's not the only thing they do. It's not the only source of funding they have, but they're a big player in mitigation in our region. So just to give you a preview, again, at my old employer, me and my colleague there developed a mitigation framework policy for their board. MidPenn didn't have one for a long time, and so we developed one for very similar reasons. We didn't have an agricultural mission, but we were frequently getting approached around environmental mitigation, and the board sort of directed staff like, "Hey, it's cool that we're getting these opportunities and you're talking about them, but how do we consider these more broadly?" And so what staff did is develop this kind of framework for analysis that every time a mitigation opportunity came in that made some sense to bring to the board, we would go through this process. And first we would look at, does this thing align with our mission, our policies, and our goals as an organization? How proximate is it to where we are, right? Is it really far afield, or is it like our neighbor who needs mitigation on our lands? And what's the regional context of this project and what's going on? I think the big one, honestly, from a political level, is what are the public, partner, and social implications? As I described, that mitigation inquiry from Lehigh was just kind of like a non-starter. It just died on my desk for obvious reasons, but the politics around accepting mitigation is really the thing that I think the board should think a lot about, because just not all projects are good projects, and not all projects are things that the board should want to be associated with. At the same time, there are good projects out there, and there are good reasons to fund some of our work that doesn't otherwise get funding, right? How well is the original project designed, and have they gone through the appropriate steps in order to identify the appropriate mitigation? Sometimes developers are just kind of want to pay the fees, right? They don't want to actually reduce their impacts. They just kind of want to check the box, right? And that, again, may not be something that the Open Space Authority wants to participate in. And, ultimately, what is the net sort of benefit or net value of the proposed project and its mitigation to the environment or to agriculture, right? Is this ultimately a win, or is this a bit of a loss for these things? So that's the type of analysis staff would prepare. And we don't have to get into the weeds today of what a potential policy should look like. But I wanted to give you a sense of what staff could do in terms of developing a board policy should you be interested in it. So kind of at this moment, I think the Open Space Authority has a couple of different options. One, I think we could signal our interest in participating in this agricultural mitigation policy. Part of why staff recommends us doing that at this time is that, there aren't a lot of agricultural land trusts or entities in our area besides the Open Space Authority. So it would really affect the county's ability to pull off this whole program if we said, no, thanks, we don't want to participate. Or conversely, if we said, yeah, maybe we are interested in participating, but we have these concerns, or we only want to participate in some of these transactions, right? There's kind of a range of responses there. So I think it's timely to, direct staff to signal that to county staff. So they're kind of developing a program with us in mind or without us in mind. And if you are interested in participating in this agricultural mitigation program on some level, staff also recommends developing an agricultural mitigation policy for the Open Space Authority, kind of in the vein of what I was just describing MidPenn's policy was like, so that if you were to receive particular, conservation easements, that the board would have a policy framework for considering those. Like I said, some projects you might not want to be associated with. Some projects you might think, yeah, this makes sense, and this is a good way to pursue our agricultural mission. And kind of while we're there, we believe we should also develop an environmental mitigation policy. I think just so we're not doing two policies over time, we can just kind of bundle them. And again, kind of avoid the ad hoc way we've reviewed mitigation projects to date. Or you have the option of just declining participation in the agricultural mitigation program. And, we probably wouldn't need any of those associated policies. Eventually, I think we would need the environmental mitigation policy in kind of either event, but it wouldn't be quite as timely if we didn't do that. So that's kind of the space to consider. And with that, I'll circle back to sort of the recommendations. One, to first provide input on whether you think the authority should participate in this agricultural mitigation program that the county is proposing, and then to direct us to come back to you. I think that's hopefully a no-brainer. And then third, to if you're interested in participating in the agricultural policy program that the county is doing, then to direct staff to develop a policy that helps the board consider such things. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Before we take questions from the board, because I have a few, is there any public comment?
There are none on Zoom.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna start because my first question is, what problem are we trying to solve with this? Are we trying to gain income? Are we trying to gain land? Are we trying to reduce an impact on workflow? I mean, what is the problem we're trying to do? Because I have some concerns, because I am very familiar with the city of San Jose's and lieu fee that they do for affordable housing. And Mike's gonna know where I'm gonna go with this. And I'm very, very familiar with their parkland dedication ordinance. And both of which are not working right now, because what is happening is the developers are just feeing out. And the fees are not equating to enough funds that will put the affordable housing where it's needed, or to build the park. Or the trail. And so because the land values aren't, keeping up. So I just want to make sure that we don't get caught in, okay, we set a fee amount, but we don't have a structure for reassessing the fee to keep up with inflation or keep up with the economy or whatever, because you're gonna want that kind of mechanism to get in place, because where the cities got caught, they haven't updated their fees since, I want to say 2018. Something like that, or no, yeah, maybe, no, not like 2019. So they're very severely out of date, and we know that the housing costs have gone up, and so they're getting undervalued, and of course, developers are gonna pay the low dollar, and we're not getting parkland, and we're not getting trail access, and so that's an issue. Then my other question is about builder's remedy and how that would apply. Because I've been here at the LAFCO proposal from the last week, I think there's something like 30 or 25 to 30 builders remedy proposals that are coming out which could have a big potential in ag land. And so if builders remedies take hold and unincorporated or whatever, would this even apply? Would they, bypass this and they wouldn't have to pay into this, and then we're just not going to get anything anyway. We're just going to get the single family development. Those are mine at the top of the head.
Okay, great. Well, maybe I'll take the last first, and Linda can can add to this. But so yeah, in the absence of the county adopting an agricultural mitigation policy, there wouldn't be agricultural mitigation for builder's remedy projects, right? So that's pretty straightforward. I think conversely, if the county does adopt the policy, and it probably has to do with when these builder remedy applications were submitted and when this EIR could potentially be adopted, as to, you know, what projects go through this process. But yeah, it would apply to those, to the builder's remedy projects, should the EIR be adopted. But again, the timing and sequencing of that matters. Linda, do you want to add anything to that?
I'll just add, the builder's remedy right now is kind of outside of the normal kind of county process, and so they're gonna have to go through CEQA for each individual project, and this mitigation framework sets kind of a basis for the mitigation that would need to occur in their EIR. But those would be done kind of in each individual project that's being proposed and evaluated, and with each EIR, they're gonna have to propose their own mitigation measures, and so through this mitigation program, if it's in place before any of those get processed, this kind of sets that baseline for how they would approach mitigation and the ratios and those kinds of things. But those would be individually evaluated with CEQA as it goes through kind of the process.
Yeah, and then did that answer your question? To your first question, which I think is something like, you know, what are we doing here? You know, so I think there's the county's motivations, and then there's, you know, our interests. And so generally speaking, I would say that the county's motivations are, you know, they're several-fold, I guess. One is that, as I described, currently single-family homes in Coyote Valley require their own EIR, right? So I think that's kind of a burden on the county that they're trying to solve. They have some interrelated elements having to do with the housing element that Linda can touch on more. And I think the other driver is this idea that, you know, if they don't do this, then there will be no mitigation, right? There will be no protection for it. So, yeah, their motivations are several-fold, I would say. To your comment, astute comment about the fee structure, I think that is of concern, as I noted in my presentation. If we were to participate and we're monitoring smallish easements, and we know over time that, you know, successive landowners may or may not be interested in agriculture, right? There's just a financial burden on OSA or even a land trust to monitor those and to enforce those. So one of the things that we've already provided to the county is concerns about fee structures and how that's going to work. Because I think in general, there are reasons to think that OSA should participate. But I think there's also good questions about at what cost, and, you know, is this the right use of our time and energy, right? So I share your concerns about the sort of fee program.
Other question, and would the county condition any exemptions? Because that seems to be, you know, notorious. You set up this kind of a structure in an ordinance, and then there's exemptions to the ordinance. So I'm thinking the one off the top of my head is farm worker housing. Would the county then say, oh, if you're going to put farm worker housing, then we don't want this policy to apply at all?
That's a good question. And again, sorry for being wishy-washy, but without the the document being public, anything I say is sort of speculative a little bit. But as I noted in the presentation, they are trying to exempt parcels of a certain size, right? So small parcels that they don't believe really on their own are suitable for agricultural production, right? And you could see how a 5-acre parcel or something like that isn't really a viable farm in this area. So I think those projects will be exempt, or, you know, somewhere around that acreage. But there may be more that are not, you know, we're not aware of because the document's not out yet.
And if I can add, this would largely apply to discretionary actions, and I'm not sure where farm worker housing falls in the zoning as to whether it's a discretionary or kind of by right. And so where there's a discretionary action, the kind of theory is that there's a change in use when they approve that, and that's where the mitigation needs to occur. If there isn't a change in use, it continues to be agricultural. And if farm worker housing is allowed through the zoning, not as a discretionary action, but by right, then this mitigation would apply.
Question?
Through the chair, could I ask a question of staff? I don't know if the county has talked about this at all, but in some parts of California, there's a higher than 1-to-1 mitigation. 2-to-1, sometimes 3-to-1. So we have a Santa Clara Valley agricultural plan that we were the principal authors with the county. Alex served on the task force, the ag task force there. And we adopted an area, it was called an agricultural resource area, or ARA. So in those ARAs, which are high priority farmlands, that maybe there might be something higher. Because if there's going to be an ag mitigation program, it's not just about generating fees, it's also about dissuading the easy development of farmland, just paying in lieu fee. So, I mean, by and large now, we've done a lot of conservation in the Coyote Valley on the Santa Teresa Road frontage. So there's not a lot left there to develop. So then we're talking about single family homes behind there, you know, in the kind of back 40 of Coyote Valley. If the county is going to require that outside the 2-acre envelope that everything else must affirmatively remain in agriculture, that might be a good thing, right? As one step. And then if there is going to be a requirement for offsite mitigation, that it's at a higher level, which generates higher fees. And then maybe there's potential for purchasing a bigger site that then we'd be more inclined to hold, as opposed to us holding all these little 1 acre here, 2 acres there, that kind of stuff. Has there been any discussion of those kinds of elements with Michael Meehan or anyone else at the county?
So maybe I'll ask Bill to weigh in as well. So they have to have several different options to mitigate. They can't just go through one channel. And so what's been laid on the table is you can do on-site mitigation like you showed, off-site and an equivalent for the size of the property, largely the amount of important farmland that is within the property, not just the development footprint, but they're looking at the overall impact because of that discretionary action being considered a change in use. And then the third option would be kind of to pay into a bank or an in lieu fee and then have us go out and seek a property, in which case we might pool multiple projects together and purchase a larger easement and kind of have it be commensurate to what's impacted. And so it's a 1-to-1 ratio currently, but not to the development footprint. What's being proposed is to the overall conversion of use, even if that is not being developed and is remaining as vacant land.
So in Aaron's example there, you have a 5-acre farmland, a 2-acre development site, and then 3-acre residual. The entire 5 acres have to be subject to the ag mitigation policy.
Correct. So the entire 5 acres is an important farmland that would be subject to the mitigation policy. The 3 acres on site would cover some of that, and then the 2 acres would, in this potential model, be paid into some sort of bank that the county would run that would pay for offsite mitigation.
Well, I think that's something we should have a discussion with the county about, because 2 things are true maybe at the same time. One, we have very little farmland left. You know, we've lost almost 50% of our productive farmland in the last number of decades. So every remaining acre is precious. County's also telling us that when we got AB 948 passed with Oshkora to designate a landscape of statewide significance, it created an issue where there is a, how would you phrase it, discretionary action that has to be taken for single family home development, which used to be allowed as of right ministerially, and now they've got to go through an environmental process, which takes time, it takes money. So one way to kind of maybe solve that is with a higher mitigation ratio for prime agricultural land in the ARA. So then it starts to be more worth our while to go out. So if it's 2-to-1, so now they have to set aside 10 acres of farmland somewhere. So, and to me, that's a fair trade-off for the loss of precious farmland, of which there is very little left in this county, so. So you can speed up, yes, the single-family home development evaluation process, but it's gonna cost, the cost is a 2-to-1, which is a deterrent from developing anywhere, you know. So,
I think that's the point, is that the fee is high enough that you don't want to make it so comfortable for them to easily fee out, because they will. Historically, it has happened.
Mhm.
And you cannot, if you don't set it high to start with, you can't go back and then try and raise it, because then it will come, no, it just hasn't worked. And, I think, we were discussing over here that, we had that recent eminent domain property where they were very careful to skirt around those, and I would not want to see that happen as well, where they're looking at the law and they're just edging around it, and then all of a sudden, like you said, we've got a single family home abutted right next to our property.
Questions, comments, input on whether we should participate?
No, I have another question. Were we approached by the county to participate in this, or?
In the sense that, yeah, staff met with us, shared the general concepts, let us know that in the proposed program, we're not named specifically, but, a government entity that does agriculture, would participate or could participate in the program. So they also put language in there about a land trust serving a similar role.
And who else did they?
As far as we know, we haven't really discussed with anyone else yet, because it is in still kind of the infancy of development.
No,
and so they've discussed with us to kind of get some
Farm
feedback.
Bureau, Land Trust.
I actually don't know the rest of their outreach.
I don't think I think they're waiting until it's ready for public consumption.
Yeah, I mean, it's logical that we be on the list.
Mm-hmm.
Are you gonna approach, are you gonna, present this to the CAC, for instance?
This item was on the CAC agenda, but for county reasons, they didn't release their EIR. And so I felt like without having a lot of meat on the bones, I didn't want to take it to them. But my hope is that when the document is actually released for circulation and I can get a little bit more into the mitigation math that I can tell people are interested in, then we can approach the CAC with,
We have two members there who are work the plan.
yeah.
Thank you.
Do you know if they're holding any public meetings at all yet, or how would one get on the mailing list so that they could participate as a citizen?
Yeah, they have not yet, but whenever they post their document, they should have links on there, and I'm happy to circulate those to the board.
I think it's important for us to be at the table on this. And I think that given the housing mandate of the state, that we're gonna have these issues. And for us to be prepared with a policy is critical so that, we can set our guidelines. And that in terms of the cost of monitoring and enforcing, I would bet that we could get volunteers to do the monitoring and turn in photographs periodically so that the staff could decide if there was something that needed to be enforced.
through the chair, Garnett, I would say, and Linda maybe can expound on this, I would think that we're not just talking or encouraging the county to set a ratio based on just the agricultural acreage to go out and buy. But built into that is the cost of maintenance and monitoring on the property.
Typically, with other programs, there have been endowments established to cover the cost of defense, stewardship, monitoring, as well as the cost to negotiate the easement and acquire the easements. And so in theory, all the costs would be covered and accounted for. The challenge that you've raised, Chair Chapman, is as costs increase over time, how to account for that to make sure they're adequately covered for the long run.
So I would just ask Andrea, does Sonoma County have something, some of these policies in place so that not only we could look at mid-teens, but also Sonoma's, and because they were recently on the news about how great they're going.
So I actually have a copy of this. It's the California Council of Land Trusts. In 2014, they had put out guidance called Conserving California's Harvest, a model mitigation program and ordinance for local governments. And so they worked with attorneys and other counties and land trusts to put together kind of a best practice guide for developing mitigation programs like this. I've shared this with the county. But it's got, information about kind of how to approach the ratios, how to approach drafting the ordinance, what kind of defense and stewardship funds are needed, and those kinds of things. And so they have named the counties that are in here that have participated, and they're also potentially ones that we can reach out to or encourage the county to reach out to learn more about their programs.
If we're thinking about participating in this, would it be a good idea for us to develop our own policy sooner rather than later, so that it could possibly have an impact on the county with us as a partner?
Yeah, I think that is kind of the thrust of staff's recommendation is, I mean, just because of the timing of things, I think it's appropriate to indicate our general interest in participating in the program, but in parallel, I think, deepening this conversation around what we really want to be involved with is important just for our own benefit. And then I think it helps the county get a sense of like, how is this program really going to work, right? Because we are, could be a principal participant should the board be interested.
Chair, one other thought I had, and this may be for staff to think about, is it's one thing to mitigate a single family home, 5 acres or something. It's not going to generate a lot of fees. It's going to take a long time to generate those fees to go buy something that is meaningful. But it could be that the county looks at a kind of a spectrum of mitigation. So a single family home maybe doesn't, it's 1-to-1 or something. But then when you start to get into multifamily or these builder remedy projects, that it's 2-to-1 or 3-to-1. And so it's both a disincentive to sprawl out onto farmland, but if those projects do get to go forward, they're gonna have to generate a lot of money to protect farmland. And I think we have to think about this, not just in whatever the county is trying to solve now, but what's gonna happen 10 years from now or 15 years from now. So I think we should think about that too, which I don't know if anybody else is dealing with this or has dealt with this yet, loss of farmland, productive farmland to builders remedy type projects.
Well, it's the problem we're trying to solve, right? Because you can't get the farmland back. Once you allow the development, once it goes forward and say the person, builds a house, or they say, okay, I mitigate, I've got a farm, and then, oops, gosh, something happened and I can't do this anymore. And then now you've got to deal with that and the consequence of that. You're not going to take down that house, right? That house is there. You've got that problem that you have to solve. And we know the pressure from the development community, from builders, the home builders are to develop as much as possible. You can't not look at something about Coyote Valley and people are commenting and saying, we want to get rid of the housing crisis, develop Coyote Valley. There's plenty of land there, and then that would build out and then we wouldn't have a housing crisis. That's a very real thing that I read. It doesn't prevent someone from coming along and saying, if we make this deeply affordable, or we make this housing for homeless, then we're solving another problem, right? We have a housing crisis. We're going to be, then that exemption is lowered, and then that fees are lowered. I have just as a personal thing to me, I have seen over time when the policy stands out like this and it is weakened over time, it constantly whittled down due to pressure, kind of a problem that comes up, and then this policy is attacked. It's very political. It's extremely political. Fee is simple, but again, you know, condition, it's gotta be a high enough fee.
No, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
You need to buy it in perpetuity.
It's right. So my own personal thing, and you know, everybody can has their own individual opinions, but I'm not comfortable at this point. I think, you know, you've got a lot of things that you need to discuss and make sure that we're not gonna be setting ourselves up for something that we have to mitigate in the future, that we're causing a problem that is unknown or what's out there. So it's my own personal.
Can I summarize? Sounds like just taking a read of the board, but there's, tepid interest in participating in a program, a lot of curiosity about the details of the program, the financing of the program, the exemptions to the program, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe if it's, appropriate, I think what I heard is a recommendation for staff to come back at a future date when we have more information. Is that right? It's your motion, but
I just had a quick question about, it sounds like the county's guidelines would be subject to 3 votes of the Board of Supervisors. So as we head into an era where we have new supervisors coming online, they could change or yes, strengthen, but I haven't seen that a lot. So I would urge caution. I think we would want to be the benchmark, and I think bring them to the better side.
Dr. Gill?
No, I don't have any question.
The chair, I wanted to ask Linda, where this originated is the county staff wanted to roll this into their rural development standards. I'm sorry?
The rural zoning update.
Rural zoning update, which is they were under some legal pressure to deal with the religious institutions on the rural areas, and so they were trying to address that in this rural zoning update. So they're folding this into it. They had a goal to try and finish that by the end of the calendar year. You have an updated timeline?
we don't think it'll be this calendar year.
Okay, that's good.
Because that addresses Director Potter's statement, question that in all likelihood, we'll have some new county supervisors wanting to look at this in the new year.
And through the chair, I'll also mention that our participation is not kind of contractually bound as far as the way that it's being designed. It's not saying that the Open Space Authority is the only one participating and will be the recipient of all of these. We'll have discretion as each of the projects come in as to whether or not we would want to participate, whether the fees would be sufficient, et cetera.
I trust you implicitly. I am just going by my previous experience. I just want to be very cautious. So I think, Aaron, to how you work, kind of encapsulate what we're trying to say. I think, yes, tepid is probably a good thing. A lot of questions. You know, this is a new proposal that you're bringing to us, so we want to make sure that we vet this thoroughly. That, staff is asking the appropriate questions, you're getting the appropriate answers. If there's some additional research, by looking at what other cities or other counties are doing, that might be applicable to have that background and then bring it back to the board for another robust discussion.
That's great. I'll let the board make the motion. I did want to ask, I guess, get feelers out. I heard some interest in developing an agricultural policy. Didn't hear any comment on environmental mitigation policy at the same time. I guess that's one thing I'd like to walk away from this meeting from.
I was a brand new board member when we had a conversation way back when about mitigations, and this same topic came up. Like, we don't want to be seen as being a avenue to ease development or help somebody fix a problem that they created by building stuff they weren't supposed to build. And so it was a very heated year. I think we discussed what our plan was going to be. Bill's nodding. I think you were a brand new lawyer for us then too, pretty close. And so I think I trust our staff to come up with like something that is the right standard, and then we should bring other people to that. I don't want to tarnish is probably a better word. I don't want to have them use our our reputation to help their policy, which I have seen. I mean, part of the reason there's so many houses out in the County Valley where they probably would be better placed in urban areas based on county policy. So that's, and they're following the policy, but a policy was designed to help people build defend farms in the ag land.
Great, thank you.
Aaron, I'd like to suggest that our staff take a look at kind of what an environmental policy might look like. And when we talk about mitigation, I think we can clarify what we mean by that. Like, we're not necessarily talking about taking bad mitigation land from a developer or, bad mitigation money from a developer. I think one of the biggest issues we're facing right now is Caltrans, Valley Water, ETA, they need to move something forward. They're a public agency that needs to move something forward. And they would be willing to fund restoration on our property, say, which is a different approach than, say, a private developer. So under what circumstances might we consider something like that? So we might look at it in kind of a more narrow way. And then on the agricultural side, I would recommend not waiting till an environmental document comes out from the county, because then they've kind of baked what their approach is. If we can generate some more, right word, kind of, aspirational best practices based on what we see as the best practices around the US, and suggest, I mean, it would be wonderful if Sonoma, that was a Freudian slip. If Santa Clara County said, we want to be leaders in the agricultural working land space for all the reasons we're trying to protect agricultural lands. And so we're going to set some different types of practices and requirements in this program. And we could help influence that. That might be a good thing. And we will have our time to react to an environmental document, but we have nothing to lose by not proposing some things that really shore up and advance the Santa Clara Valley Ag Plan and the prime farmland, because we know these threats aren't going to stop. They're going to keep coming at us.
I like being a leader in this rather than reactionary. And if we don't have a time constraint, then that allows us time to be more thoughtful and develop a plan that we like, rather than trying to fit in with something that they're trying to craft, and you don't know who the other, exactly who the other actors are and who is trying to formulate that we're trying to fit in. I think that's what, at least where my concerns are coming. I think that I can hear from Director Potter. He probably has the same concerns. Who else is driving this? Right. I'd rather us see us in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I'm agree with that. I think maybe OSC and their own agricultural mitigation policy. We have to work on it.
Yes, we do need a motion. I think Ryan is looking, I think he's heard us.
I would like to recommend that staff follow the general manager's directions as she's recited them this evening, and any further that she has based on her experience.
I'll second that.
We have a motion to follow the general manager's directions. And then, yes, and incorporate the comments from the board this evening, and then come back to the board at a later date so that we can continue to explore this plan. Motion from Director Anlo with a second by Director Kennett. Okay.
So you guys can bring next time, whatever the detailed proposals you guys just draft, and we can look at it again, right?
Yeah, if I'm hearing the motion correctly, once there's a agricultural counties program is circulated for comment, we can come back with details. We can probably try to, depending on the timing of things, come back with a skeleton proposal for our own policy for the board to review, incorporating some of the things that Andrea was talking about. So yeah,
You have to wait until
I don't think
some timeline, or can we just?
Yeah, I think, one thing I'll just say explicitly is we really have no idea when the county's they were supposed to release it like a month ago. And I don't know what happened. So, it could be any day, it could be 3 months from now. We don't really know. So, time is of the essence. We'll do what we can in the short term, but, understand that
Let me
the
just ask
county.
this question.
Yeah.
Is there, I mean, if we get information in before they release it, then we might delay releasing it. Take a look at our information, but timing wise, I'll leave to the general manager. Guys, it just seems like the more proactive that we can be to get what we would want this to look like, better.
Yeah, I'll also add that we've already submitted extensive comments about the draft document, and there's a lot of detail in there, but we're definitely trying to make it work for us because, like I noted, we could be a larger participant in it. But as Bill counseled me, before staff goes too far in, shaping the policy, getting a sense from the board whether you want to participate at all is a foundational question. So So what I'm hearing is curiosity and interest about the details, and staff will come back with that.
Well, also in my line of work is when staff starts delaying something, it doesn't mean that they're stopped working on it. That means there's other things that are coming in at them and they're trying to incorporate that and trying to figure out how they're gonna bring all that input forward into the document. So it means maybe we're not the only ones commenting. There could be others that are commenting, and again, that's a little thing in the back of my head, like who else is behind this?
I had a Charlie Brown and Lucy moment here because this is reminding me of the Habitat plan where we were an integral key partner in the development of the guidelines for all of that. We weren't a stakeholder agency, but we were an advisory and we did all this stuff. And now at times we have a very complicated relationship with that very same entity. So I just had a flashback to that, so I thought I better vocalize it. So because that was a while ago and not everybody was here then. But so just provide that those thoughts if we get too far in with somebody else's plan, then we're too far in with their plan.
Okay. Any more discussion? We have a motion to follow the staff, or direct staff to follow the general manager's direction. It's very ambiguous. Because otherwise they wouldn't follow this. So, lively discussion. No, there. All right, so let's.
I can fix that if somebody would just kind of summarize for me. I was doing my best to follow along.
I think it was to follow the general manager's direction and to take a deeper dive and I think also I want to incorporate the board's comments this evening and well as bring it back before we agree to be part of anything. Yes.
Incorporate the board's comments
Yes. Bring back to the board.
and bring back to the board.
Yes, after you're incorporating the general manager's directions, the board's comments, discussions further on with staff, then bring it back to the board before we accept being part of this plan. That sound right?
But to work on our own mitigation.
And also simultaneously to work on our own.
That's under board comments.
Yes. Okay, I think that captures it. So the motion is to direct staff to follow the general manager's directions, incorporate the board's comments and discussion and bring back to the board. I think that's generic enough. Okay.
Okay, and then it was Director Annabelle that motioned?
I believe it's Director Annabelle with the motion and. Okay, all right. Are we ready?
All right, Director Kennett,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annabelle,
Yes,
Director Alexander,
Yes.
Director Potter,
Yes.
Director Gill.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passing unanimously.
Thank you for the discussion.
Thank you. It does, I guess. Okay, fun after. Okay, all right. We have no committee meeting summaries, so now we are informational reports. General Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Mark and I are pooling our report outs tonight, so I'm gonna have Mark deliver those. Mark?
Good evening, directors. Mark Landgraf, Assistant General Manager. I have a few report outs as the General Manager indicated. First of all, on Friday last week, Federal Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland visited San Jose and held a briefing in Mayor Mahan's conference room for selected guests. Fortunately, Andrew McKenzie, our General Manager, was one of those selected guests. And the briefing was to allow folks there to learn about the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership Program, which is a federal program established in 2014, funded through the Land and Water Conservation Fund. The city of San Jose received $4.5 million for development of park in the Spartan Keys neighborhood. And that program was created to help disadvantaged urban communities that lack access to close by outdoor recreation. So it was a really good opportunity for the general manager to introduce herself to Secretary Haaland, to have some conversations. And the grant program, even though it's not one that we would be applying for, it parallels in many ways the urban grant program, where we provide funding to cities and other entities for urban opportunities to connect with nature. So it was very relevant to our work. Another item I wanted to mention is that the Open Space Authority has been invited to host the Beijing Ecology and Environment Bureau, which is the equivalent of our EPA, on a tour on October 23rd to talk about the work that we are doing in Coyote Valley regarding biodiversity, nature-based solutions, and conservation planning. So increasingly, we are seen as a leader in this space and as a model for achieving state goals in climate goals like 30 by 30. And so we were invited to host that tour that will include Director Chen Tian from the Beijing Ecology and Environment Bureau, as well as Jessica Gordon, the Research Director of the California-China Climate Institute at UC Berkeley, and some staff from the Nature Conservancy. Another item I wanted to mention is that on Tuesday, I attended a polling briefing that was given by Joint Venture Silicon Valley. They did a Bay Area-wide poll on just the sense that people have on the direction of the region, quality of life issues, and then specifically on perceptions of the technology sector, which was of interest. You may have seen a Mercury News article that talked about some of the results from this poll. It was very interesting, and some of the results were of interest to the work we're doing here at the Open Space Authority. One example is, there were questions about quality of life and cost of living, and a majority of respondents say that things are worse than they were a year ago for those items, quality of life and cost of living, but they were less worse than they were the previous year the polling was done. So you can look at that whichever way you want. One very interesting comment was made. So during the polling briefing, there were panelists that were invited to speak in addition to just presenting the data from the poll. And one question that was posed to a panelist, the panelist is Charles Atkins with McKinsey and Company. They are a large management consulting firm that's seen as a local authority on the tech sector and tech sector strategy and growth. And he was posed with sort of a question, sort of a statement that isn't, you know, a lot of the trouble that we're having in the housing crisis here in Silicon Valley currently, part of the tragedy of Silicon Valley, that we're limited by our geography, surrounded by mountains and open space, and you know, sort of the statement was kind of troubling to me when I heard it, but then the partner at McKinsey responded and said, no, that's not at all the case. I'm paraphrasing here, but he said that there is space within the urban areas for accommodating the housing that's needed. We just have to deal with land use regulation and using infill space. So it was really good to hear that result, especially in the context of earlier comments made by Director Chaplin on another item. Another thing I wanted to mention is last night there was an event put on by the Santa Clara County League of Conservation Voters. And I'm very proud to mention that Director Annable received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the League. Some of us on staff were there to experience that. In full disclosure, I serve as a volunteer on the board of the League of Conservation Voters, but I'm mentioning this tonight not with that hat on, but because as a staff member of the Open Space Authority, is my time up? Oh, okay. As a staff member of the Open Space Authority, of course, we're very proud of Director Annable for having received that award, and wanted to mention that to so that your board is aware, and also in the context of on November 14th, there will be at our Open Space Authority board meeting an event to honor Director Annable as well. So, and then just one last thing I wanted to mention is as we are in the last throes of the election season before November 5th, just a gentle reminder that if any of you as private citizens are out there advocating for or against candidates, measures, what have you, just to make clear that if you're doing that by email or any digital means or in person, to make sure those comments are made without any reference to the Open Space Authority. Those are being made by you as a private citizen, because of course, as a public agency, we don't do that. So that's all I had.
Now the time off.
Thank you, Andrea. Good evening, Directors. Lee Rauscher, Assistant General Manager. A couple of updates. 33 Las Colinas, as we refer to it here as 33 LC, has been receiving some TLC lately. We have made a bit of an investment upgrading our lights to LED. We had some difficulty keeping lights on, not because we didn't pay PG&E, but just they were faulty. So actually, these are a couple projects that Ivy has been integral to implementing. Some new lights may have been harder to see pulling into the parking lot, the beautiful resurfacing, but hopefully you can actually see the parking spaces. It was also restriped. So again, a little TLC for the building here. And then also, I don't think we shared this at the last board meeting, but forgive my enthusiasm if this is a repeat. The IT group worked with Megan Drager's group, our grants program, to file a grant application for IT cybersecurity improvements. This is through Cal OES. It's up to $250,000, so we ask for every single penny. And I think they make announcements in November, so we'll let you know what happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Directors. A couple quick things. Jackie Latham was here earlier this summer with an item for the next urban grant program, some guidelines that we discussed. I just wanted to share an update. Jackie's currently out on maternity leave, but she'll be back early in the new year. We plan to come back to the board with final guidelines and a revised timeline and go through that with the board at that time. And another item, just as you know, we're moving ahead with the transfer of the Laguna Seca properties scheduled for November 14th. And just kind of a fun, we got to look at a giant check today that the state parks, the $10 million has been deposited into escrow. So that was exciting. We're just waiting. There's another $6 million coming from Resources Agency. So we're on track to get everything in place. So I'm looking forward to celebrating that at that board meeting that happens to be that night.
Thanks, Megan. Aaron, anything else?
Great. Just a few agricultural updates. Next week, I'll be attending an event called the Santa Clara Food Hub Alliance, hosted at Stanford by some familiar faces, Julie Morris and others. Joe from Terra Mico will be there. I think he's hosting one of the panels, so looking forward to that. I forget if it was already mentioned, but we have our agricultural tour on October 18th, the morning of. Thanks for accommodating the shift in schedule so we can see some more production. Paul, whose last name Amirasu from B&T Farms will be our host. We'll be going down to Gilroy, actually quite near our Pratt property. You might not know that B&T is our neighbor in the South County as well as in the North County, seeing some of their harvesting operations. So really looking forward to that. We'll be joined by some CAC and some other agriculturally interested folks. So that'll be exciting. And last but not least, I'm quite pleased to announce that we've hired an agricultural specialist, Anna Regalaldo. I should work on that. She joins us from Vegilution. She's been there for the last couple of years. Before that, UC Cooperative Extension, Valley Verde, Urban Garden Program. And then before that, a stint with Sustainable Agricultural Education, or SAGE, aka our friend Sabella Kraus, who's one of our agricultural advisors. She is a local of San Jose. It's where she was raised. She now lives in Gilroy. Her parents moved here from Mexico, and so she's fluent in Spanish and works with Spanish-speaking farmers. So we're really excited to have her. She's joining us on the auspicious November 5th election day. So hopefully it'll be a good day for her to join. And we're really looking forward to getting her working on many things, apparently including the agricultural policy as well.
Thanks, Madam Chair. That's it.
Legal counsel.
No report, Madam Chair.
One of these days you have to have a report.
I'll have a report. When I you come up with stuff, but I don't want to bore you, but yeah, when there's big legislative changes and stuff that Mr. Landgraf has not already reported to you.
Okay,
Certain.
all right. Director Gill, board reports.
I don't have any report.
Director Potter.
No report.
Director Alexander.
No report.
Mine is short and sweet. There's a LAFCO meeting last week. After 3 hours, we did take all the comments, and thank you to the OSA that did comment. And I understand in the motion that was granted, legal counsel will be asked to weigh in and provide another letter. There was an amended motion at the very end, so you're going to be required to weigh in on the, I can't remember what the policy was now. I think it's the out of agency contract policy. Yeah. Anyway, but it was forward, so the ad hoc committee meets at the end of this month, and then we'll be back in December. Oh, and I also want to congratulate Director Animal. I did attend the event last night, and it was a lot of fun.
Great. It's wonderful to have everyone that I worked with be there. It was very exciting in that respect. I will give a report regarding Santa Clara County Parks as a liaison. In 2025, they're going to be increasing their fees 10% per year for the next 3 years. Has to do with parking fees, camping fees. They gave a natural resources report, and they had 27 fire incidents that they had to respond to. And so they're going to be doing more prescribed burn, and adjacent to Calero, either just happened or it's going to happen. They said they give us like 30 days notice so that we're aware that it's happening. The county parks now has 55,000 plus acres with their latest acquisition. And they're getting a new assistant director. Her name is Julian And like she comes with a long history of like 20 years involved in parks and open space. They're pretty excited about that. They're changing their picture policy. I don't know if we have a picture policy or not, but they're changing their policy so that if you were to take a photograph, you have to get permission from whoever you photographed before you could use it on some kind of social media or other posts that you might do to the public. So, that's it. And then the last one, which was they actually have volunteers that are out filling up the gopher and squirrel holes. So as we look at our new ADA trail, we might get our volunteers to, during the winter when it's not so hot, go out and fill up some of the holes around where we're gonna have that trail. Anyway, so they have published their annual report and it was a really great report. And they're gonna make a hard copy available. And I was gonna bring one over to the office when they do. I thought you might be interested.
Thank you. Yeah, the Calero burn was smoked us out of our neighborhood and they never let us know. Our whole neighborhood and everybody in our valley totally went nuts. Cops were called and everything and what was going on. Anyway, we forgot. Anyway, we found out what it was, but still.
You might want to talk to them to expand the radius of notice. Because I think they only notify the adjacent landowners, but I don't know.
We did, but we're downwind. Anyway, it's not a complaint, just I attended a sustainability conference for 2 days in Ashland, Oregon. And it was very interesting and I'll promise to get us out here by midnight. Before everybody gets up and leaves. There's a few things. First of all, it was sponsored by the School of Business. And the fact that a sustainability conference, environmental sustainability conference, sponsored by the School of Business states something about the attitude of the university itself. And the whole school apparently has jumped in on this. So it was aimed mostly at small businesses. Ashland's a tourist town, amongst other things. And the Rogue River Valley is a huge agricultural area, as I'm sure you all know. Everybody's heard of Harry and David, and all of that. So several things have happened since I've been there. For instance, the mascot of the school has become the red-tailed hawk from the Red Raider. The university is the first public school in the United States that produces all of its energy on campus and is self-sustained. They haven't quite hit the 24-hour because it's at 2,000 feet. It's in the Siskiyou Mountains. There's a snow factor, but they have the daytime. They have they're saying they have of the 24 hours. They have about 18 of them covered over the course of a year. So, the other thing that stood out is on campus is the Department of Interior Forensic Laboratory. I don't know if we've used them or not. What they do is, for instance, if we study the migration of critters across, and we take a DNA sample to see what the mix is, it goes to Ashland. It's the only one in the country. What else? They're beta testing they picked strawberries as very interested in organic farming. So one of the issues is because of the gases used to grow strawberries throughout the world. They would like to see that eliminated. And the main bug has been identified. So they've used AI and they've created a program and a drone. It's right out of Star Wars. But this drone is programmed to specifically seek this particular bug and zap it with a laser. And it's in beta testing now, and it seems to be working. Go figure. So anyway, it was a very interesting meeting. There's a lot more to it than that. I got a backstage tour of the Shakespearean Festival, and there's a lot more coming. There'll be more coming down that I'll be passing on to staff as happening. But it was 2 days that I actually had no trouble staying awake at.
Okay. All right. That and the end of the reports, and we are formally adjourned.